Hi there, and welcome back to the Beyond Product podcast. Our guest today has a huge vision for our world to make every building we reside in, whether it's our homes or work, hospitals, or really any closed place, healthier. Please give a warm welcome to lifelong student of how good ideas become great products, Elizabeth Caley.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's an absolute pleasure.
Now let's move now a bit towards your founder journey,
Sure.
because you told us a bit how you thought about that problem with your Sam, your co-founder, and you fell in love with that problem of making people healthier and reducing illnesses, etc., etc. But you're coming from digital tech mostly, right? Either at Firma, Microsoft or OpenText, or at Firmex it was software based. What did you have to go through yourself personally to become a successful founder in this industry?
Yeah, I think for trying something new or a new type of company, new type of technology, there's definitely a big shift between software and hardware, but it was a partial shift. So hardware
Mhm.
you have to get right. Hardware is hard is the way that it goes. But the nice thing is there's a lot of lessons learned out there too, and the cost of 3D printing for prototyping has really come down.
Right.
So the economics of trying things with hardware has changed dramatically,
Mhm.
and you can try a lot more things. I think we
Mhm.
were also partially lucky that during the pandemic, people were willing to try stuff. So we feel like we got 3 to 5 years worth of R&D done in 18 months
Mhm.
because we could just try it in so many different places in so many different
Right.
ways
Right.
and keep iterating on it. Um, but with the tech changing, or more emphasis on hardware than I'd had before, I think the real thing for any product manager who's thinking about a long career in product roles, you got to be really good at learning a new market. So a little less about what programming language anybody's using or anything else, which is always going to change. It's more about how do I learn the commercial real estate market and the cruise ship market and the
Uh-huh.
education market, where I've spent a lot of time on Fortune 1000, just sort of more broadly in the past,
Mm.
and just making sure that I understand how people think, how quickly they move, how open they are to tech pricing models like subscription pricing models, and
Mhm.
um, how quickly they adopt. All of that was just as much to learn, if not more, than getting a deep dive on how to make thousands and thousands of these
Yes.
at an effective price.
Yeah, yeah. But that's also an interesting point there, because you mentioned several verticals that you have to learn, all of them with a similar problem, but still they behave differently. They have different regulations, different type of management that think differently.
Yes.
And usually we are told as entrepreneurs to pick a niche and focus on that niche. Did you
Yeah.
focus on one of them first, or did you try in different areas just to see that the problem is common to all of them?
Yeah, this was one of the things that Sam and I, when we reviewed what we wanted to do the same and what we wanted to do differently between the last company and this company, we
Hmm.
wanted to do this the same, and I think we have, which is we want an incredibly experimentally driven team. Most of our teams over the last 10 years have been a lot of scientists and engineers, and then one business person or fewer business people. So the spirit of trying something, collecting the data, using that data, making a tweet, trying it again is inherently there. There's a little bit of differences between doing it
Right.
in a specific academic environment and doing it in a business
Yeah.
environment. But
Yeah.
we wanted to keep that, and so our goal, especially early on, especially for the first 2 years, is to get out to as many places as we possibly could, to iterate as fast as we possibly could with the hardware and the software and the algorithms,
Hmm.
and try a whole bunch of different markets, because nobody had ever seen this before. This is not a capability that existed before. This is a brand new data set,
Hmm.
and we wouldn't have been able. We could have, but it would have been a mistake to extrapolate how cruise ships would have responded to thinking
Hmm.
about this entirely new thing unless we talked to all the major cruise ships.
Right.
And so that was a big part of essentially what we did for the first 2 years. And that's led us to a go to market strategy now where we know the technology can work anywhere, a pig farm or a royal palace.
Hmm.
But we're focused now on like who moves the fastest, who's got the budget and the capability to take action on the data.
I
And
see.
that allows us to pick where we sell direct versus where we might have partners lead the sale.
Oh, I see. So it's more for that go-to-market strategies within specific industry based on how the industry is actually working.
Yes.
So if you would have to recommend to new entrepreneurs or someone that is starting their ways in these areas, that they have to learn all of these industries and to find people to even talk with and get involved with, from your experience, what would you tell them?
This is a wonderful question. I've been lucky to have mentored about 150 different startups in the last decade through Techstars and a program called CDL. And one of the first things I always say is follow the money. If you're doing a B2B sale, then you want to figure out where the wallet comes from and who makes the decisions about that wallet.
Mm,
And and that's where you should spend your time. Spend time with end users. If your end users are not the economic buyer, make sure that they would be happy, but they're
mhm.
not ultimately the one who's going to be entering the credit card or is cutting the PO or signing off on the PO.
Right,
Then treat that as like secondary feedback, because I find a lot of entrepreneurs are like, oh no, I've got this great champion in the HR department, and I love HR departments. They're not where the budget is for technology
right,
innovation. Just
right.
not where the money is.
Yeah.
So great that you have HR on side. They will be one of 8 people around a table that has to sign off on a $25,000, $50,000, $100,000 project with you, or purchase from you. So
Mhm,
figure out
mhm.
who is actually the one who has more clout or more budget that
Right.
line item it would come from.
That's one of the conundrums for product managers many times, that we want to build for the users, for the clients, but they're not, especially in B2B, they're not the
Yes.
one that pay the bills. And the people that pay the bills don't always understand the product or what the product needs to do. So how do you solve for that?
Yeah. It's a little bit different in every industry. So when we were working, with Firmex and legal, we had the benefit of the fact that you could go in with a price point that almost any junior person could sign off on, a
Right.
first data room, and it would be an emergency purchase, right? The
Yeah.
deal is about to get done. I got to set up a data room tonight. I can put it on a credit card, and nobody's going to fire me for it.
Yes.
And then you
Yes.
can land and expand from there.
It was a
Um,
great strategy, of course. Hmm.
yeah. And I still love land and expand strategies. And that's a lot of what we have done with our pricing approach, which is
Hmm.
make sure that there's an entry point that's really, really low, get people hooked on the data. And
Hmm.
then, they come and they ask for the data more often, or, to greater fidelity, or an installed system. So that was a very deliberate product design or pricing design decision for
Hmm.
us.
Hmm.
And then the ability to be able to take that the users that touch your product along their way and make them strong advocates for it is incredibly important. But at the
Hmm.
end of the day, if you're not talking and getting feedback from the person who makes a decision and understanding how they make a decision and what they're trading it off against, and again, what line item it's going to come out and what's their budgeting cycle, and is their budget going up or is their budget going down, and making sure, especially with the large enterprise deals, that you have multiple points of contact because there's a lot of
Hmm.
turnover.
Yeah.
And we've definitely, despite knowing all this and all our best intentions, our champion has ended up being fired with the entire department that was just about to sign off on a project.
Yep.
And so it's trying to make sure that you've got enough connection points within large organizations as well, so that you can have durability even as these Fortune 1000 companies are going through a huge amount of turmoil as well.
Right. I would try to summarize it that as a product manager, you shouldn't really neglect any one of them. So you should you should look at who are the users and make them happy and make them really champions for the usage of the product. But then also make those that making those decisions easy on them to make those decisions and show them why the decision should be easy for them to make. So everyone is your stakeholder at the end of the day. Uh,
Yeah, that's what I love about B2B sales. It's not about trying to B2C where you're trying to convince somebody to put something in a shopping cart and complete your shopping cart. There's a
yeah.
lot of different factors at play, which I personally love. I
Yeah.
think I think the ability for a B2B decision maker to, or somebody who's selling to B2B decision makers, to make a hero out of the person who's making the decision is a
Right.
really interesting strategy as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So mostly what's in their mind, especially if they're in a corporate environment, am I going to get fired for making this decision? where if you can help them flip, if you can show them all the ways that they can be, highlighted as a thought leader in their industry on
Right.
a podcast, for example, all of those kind of things that they can use when they're up for their promotion or they're up for their raise or their performance
Yeah.
review. How
Yeah.
do you
Makes sense.
make them a hero is a big part into the thinking.
Yeah, but we are saying it as if this is obvious to everyone. But I've seen situations that organizations either were only targeting the people make decisions, but then the product really sucked. They
Yes.
like people couldn't use it, or and then it failed because they couldn't use it.
Yes.
Or companies were targeting only the end users, and then it was very hard for them to sell it. So you really don't want to neglect any of them. As obvious as it sounds, it's not always very obvious when on the ground making that call. Another thing about your founder journey. One of the things that you already mentioned is how well you work with Sam, your co-founder, and you're actually co-CEOs, and that's something I don't see very commonly, like a co-CEO. How does that work exactly? And also, if you would have to give if you had, you know what, let's answer this question and then I will come up to the next question.
Yes, it is definitely an uncommon model,
Hmm.
having co-CEOs, and it's one that I wouldn't tell any founders to go into lightly.
Uh-huh.
Uh, what happened with Sam when we started working together? I joined Meta as the COO. He was a scientist by training, and Meta was his first company. And we just found like there was a really good complement in his brilliant brain, innovation and science, and just devouring research and figuring out like what's next.
Hmm.
And my background in 25 years of running tech businesses and tech companies, and we ended up pretty quickly, regardless of titles, co-leading the company and the team together. And so
Hmm.
we fell into it fairly naturally. And that's because he had the trust and lack of ego to be like, no, 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 that's a thing a CEO should do versus a COO should do.
Hmm.
Um, and so we just ended up pretty naturally figuring out like where each other's strengths were, where we complement, where we overlapped, where
Right.
you could put either of us in the room and hopefully nobody would know the difference if one of us was there or the other person was there.
Yeah.
Um, and we decided to codify it and make it official as co-CEOs with with this company with Poppy.
Right.
But it's something that you have to work really hard at. We deliberately spend time figuring out, is the team still good with it? Right? Have we done a pulse check lately? Is anybody confused of who they should go to for what, or what the roles and responsibilities are? Are investors
Right.
good with it? Um, and then also using the advantage of it, which is like, I want to get better at something you're really good at. So for the next quarter, can we switch it up? And I'm going to take the lead on that, and I'm going to call you in when I need you. And then if you could, so we have a very deliberate, regular series of conversations about how
Interesting.
we work together, and it
Yeah.
makes us both stronger for it.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I can see how that can work, but you definitely had to have that background working together and really knowing each other. I've heard great stories about co-founders, and I heard some, horror stories about co-founders. What would you give as a recommendation to someone looking for a co-founder? What should they look for really to make it successful?
I wish this was something that was easier to interview for. How they deal with stress.
Okay.
Startups
Hmm.
are very stressful. They are very stressful, and having aligned values, just like a marriage, having the core set of values being really, really similar, if not identical, helps you get through the stressful situations. But it's good to know how people handle stress, if you can figure that out ahead of time at all,
Hmm.
which is hard to do,
Yeah.
because that's when the rubber really hits the road. When you're looking to fundraise and you can't, or you have to like do layoffs, or you really disagree over a hire up front. Hopefully you've done the work to figure out, to agree how you're going to disagree, and
Yes.
how you're going to resolve things. And so just as an
Hmm.
example, Sam and I figured out early on that we can have different opinions on stuff, but we're generally not, our goal is not to confuse or the team,
Hmm.
by disagreeing about stuff like that, and being like, oh, should I listen to EC or should I listen to Sam? Or when we do talk about why we disagree. And
Hmm.
so we're both fairly logical people, which is a great place to start. I'm making this decision based on these criteria. Are your criteria the same criteria? Okay, yes, they are. Oh, you forgot this one. Okay, I'll add that one. And
Yeah.
then we find usually when we disagree, it's just the weighting of the values. So it's like I think this one's more important than this one, and so that's why I'm a no and you're a yes. But you can talk it through, and then ultimately it's whoever we agreed at the beginning of the quarter was going to have the final say so over product direction. If we
Mhm.
disagree and it's Sam's quarter, then we go with his call.
Yeah. Maybe I was thinking while we were saying that about the stressful situation, how can we actually interview for that? I was thinking maybe an extreme could be to go together to an amazing race or something like that. But maybe there should be a boot camp for maybe a startup idea out there, or maybe there is already a boot camp for co-founders to be that goes together and they put them into this stressful situation and see how they can handle each other. Maybe something
There,
like that.
there's a couple of interesting programs. Canada has a program called Next or Next Canada, Next
Mhm.
36. I think they've renamed a couple times, but it's geared primarily towards students. But they take a whole year and they put groups of students together, and they have to start a company. And so I think you learn a lot about yourself as well
Absolutely.
as who makes a good partner for you along
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah.
Um, and then companies, programs like the Creative Destruction Lab, which I absolutely adore being a mentor at. I've been doing it for almost 8 years now.
Hmm.
They're actually companies, but they're usually really early stage, and it's usually they're all scientific based. So it's a professor and his graduate student or her graduate student who have come together and tried to figure out if this thing they've discovered in the lab can actually become a business. I think
Hmm.
that's an interesting approach as well to try things out.
Yeah. And a lot of startups are starting from schools because that's the environment where they actually have the ability to do that, yeah, research and looking for what they want to do in their life. And if you already have this entrepreneurship mindset and entrepreneurship leadership from the school,
Mhm.
it's kind of like very natural for people to come from that. So programs like that are definitely, I've seen definitely are great to find co-founders. No, that's very very cool. I every time I talk with you, I learn so much new things about you, but also about entrepreneurship and product management in general. And to me, thinking back about how you describe your diving into hardware IoT type of products, I always had this. I actually never worked with IoT. I always worked with just software digital products because I'm
Mhm.
like, this takes so much long to create this type of products, much faster to to create digital. So kudos for you for going that way.
I've fallen in love with hardware. And part of the reason why is installed hardware is incredibly robust. People, once it's installed, it stays around for a long time. So it's really nice from that point of view. But it's also there's so much at the intersection of software and hardware now. So I can
Mhm.
give our users a different experience next week, after our next sprint on the software side. But having a well-oiled hardware team and hardware machine where
Mhm.
we can do small iterations without having to run a batch of 1,000 devices is incredibly important to be able to get up and running quickly too.
Yeah, and also this device these days, you can do the upgrade remotely. You
Yeah.
can do, yeah. I just installed a smart plug in my home, and immediately after I installed it, I was told, "Oh, it needs an update." Oh, okay, let's update this. So it's fairly simple these days. So it's kind of all connected, which is really great. You also mentioned to me when we were talking before, and that's kind of connected actually with the previous point about students entrepreneur, that you actually became an entrepreneur later in your career.
Yes.
How is that, and would you recommend it to other people?
Would I recommend becoming an entrepreneur in your 40s? It was important for me. I know myself. I knew myself well enough to know that until I had some financial stability, I was not going to be great at the risk taking of an entrepreneur. And
Mhm.
I do come across many potential founders sort of in this spot too, who are younger and maybe they didn't grow up with a lot of money, maybe they're immigrants or children of immigrants, and the safe way to just feel secure in what you're doing is to get a job at a bank or an insurance company, get that business degree, etc. And so that was an important step for me. I needed to be able to earn a salary and put some money aside before, and know that my mortgage was going to be okay before
Mm.
I took the leap. And I also feel like I was deliberately learning a ton by working for other people,
Right.
which is a great economic way of learning business, is when somebody else is making your paycheck.
Right.
So it was a really good fit for me, but not all. A lot of people in their 40s are dealing with big families and lots of other things that are demands on their time. So I wouldn't recommend it for everybody. It definitely is an exhausting process. I think no matter when you start it,
Mm.
um, startups are all encompassing. So whoever you're partnering with in your life, make sure they understand as well. And
Yes.
it is something you could do at any age, but at 40, there's just some unique things to think about, and being,
Hmm.
how if this whatever you if you're doing well, this is going to be 7 to 10 years of your life, if not longer.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what I'm hearing from everyone that is doing this too. It's planned for like about a decade or so.
Yeah.
You know, and that's when you're successful. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely,
Feel fast otherwise, because you don't want to spend 7 years and not be successful. But
absolutely,
no.
absolutely, absolutely. Or cut your losses and do something else, right?
Exactly.
Um, Very cool. And then another question, also about this journey. How long did it take you to see or get from the initial ideas that you're running, you and Sam, to a product market fit? And maybe the first question should be: do you feel you already have a product market fit? And if you do, how long did it take you?
Yeah, I think we believe we're in product market fit. We're really in growth stage right now,
Mhm.
and so with this version, what we've done is, I think again the pandemic was a bit of a unique situation where, if you look at the milestones we set out, which were always aggressive, because speed is your advantage as a startup,
Right.
um, they were incredibly. In 18 months, we went from a slide deck to at least two different versions, like two different iterations of the hardware out there, and I think 200 different buildings, and all paid customers, not trials. So
Mm.
we were able to accelerate sort of like two or three times as much, because people were really looking for solutions during the pandemic. And what
Mhm.
we've been able to do is synthesize all of that, and then in the 18 months following, been able to come up with a third generation of hardware, get it entirely validated, get it written into an international building standard, and start to prove out those case studies, that ROI, that energy savings angle as well, and roll it out to another 1,000 locations. So this is growth go time for us right now. That's the next stage of the company, and we're feeling
Mhm.
like not everything's figured out. There's definitely more things to improve. We're always fiddling with the software and the dashboards
Yeah.
and the data analysis, but it is doing all the things that, like, all the value propositions are fully realized now.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely, COVID did a lot of, as bad as it was to many people, it
Yeah.
did a lot of good for many other people. So I do see how it was really beneficial, to have this explosion of need and be able to actually test different things and stuff like that. Do you remember like the point when you had like, um, your aha moment, not so much your client, to see that, yes, we have something here that can explode and people really find value from.
I think of two milestones that come to mind when you ask that question. One was, the first iteration, first version of the product, Christmas Eve,
Hmm.
uh, and we had installed in a number of schools and, office buildings, co-working spaces, and a couple of other different types. And
Hmm.
we got our first positive COVID hit, with the version of the product that was just testing for COVID,
Uh-huh.
um, and we um, sent out the alert to the facilities manager, and she did everything she needed to do to make sure her staff wasn't going to get sick, and I think they asked people to wear masks and all sorts of different things. And then I think about 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later, or not even that, sorry, 3 or 4 days later after Christmas,
Uh-huh.
they told us that they had 3 people who had COVID positive tests and came into the office anyways. So we knew
Okay.
the technology worked. And she's like, thank God you told me, because I think they were getting paid hourly, so they wanted to come to work, etc. But they were putting everybody else at risk. And so that
Yes.
was definitely one aha moment. Like, look, the tech works. People took the actions they were supposed to take. We stopped our first outbreak.
That's
Um,
amazing. Mhm.
and so and then luckily we got to repeat it many times throughout the pandemic, and
Mhm.
got amazing feedback from people, which just makes your
Right.
heart go every time. And then I think with the newest version, it really has been the reception we've gotten both from the technical folks in the industry, um, who have basically dedicated their life to measuring using research grade material, equipment, how things are working, and they're like, yeah, that $20,000 machine is giving me exactly the same readouts as your lot less money sensor.
Mhm.
And then the buildings we're rolling out to is like, this is great data that we are going to build into our building management system. So we're going to be
Yeah.
making decisions based off of it now. We're going to automate how our building heals itself based on
Mhm.
the public data. That to me is sort of the second example of like, yeah, we've got product market fit.
That's amazing. That's such a great feeling to have, and that's why I call it the aha moment for us. Creating the product, because we're always thinking about the aha moment for the users, but what about us, right? Uh, um, no, that's very cool. So I just want to ask you a few very general questions. Advice for founders, and you mentioned you give a lot of advice, and you already gave advice before about follow the money. But what would be the top advice? Maybe follow the money is the top advice, but maybe another one for founders that you would give.
I think there would be two others. One is you've already mentioned it, but falling in love with the problem and not the solution or the tech.
Hmm.
Again, I think with a lot of technical founders, it's what you worked your PhD on, and so you're like, what solution, what problem can I find for this tech?
Yes.
Definitely, sometimes that works, but it's a very small percentage of the time. So if you can fall in love with not even just like one problem, but like a general area. So like that statistic I talked about the health in buildings, and that for us has been a leading star.
Hmm.
But we always knew we were going to swip out different technology approaches, models along the way, and that
Yeah.
that that was good to know going in, and to
Hmm.
expect that, and to have your team expect that too. Again, your team is working many hours a day as a startup on
Yes.
something, and then you come along, a few weeks later and say, "Hey guys, we're turning this way because
Yeah.
that's the data we're getting and the feedback we're getting." They need to understand that that's normal and good. Um,
Yes. Yes.
so then I think the second one is to talk to 3 times as many stakeholders as you think you need to, and ask
Mhm.
the tough questions that again might be awkward if it's your first time around the money, but also around like what makes them successful in their job, what gets them promoted, you know, um, before you write one line of code or pick up, one pipette in the lab if it's a biotech company,
Mm.
or print out one nylon thread of hardware in a hardware company. That research time, that really in-depth research time, is the best use of your funds as an early stage company.
Yeah.
And then get to rapid prototyping for sure, but you can do a lot before as a founder, before you bring anybody else on board, in order to really get a good sense of what your first shot should be at the goal.
Yeah. Yeah. These are great tips for sure. What will be top advice not to do?
Don't take anybody's advice too seriously,
Okay.
including the advice I just gave.
Okay.
The CDL program I've mentioned is essentially a way for people who invest in companies, people who've run companies before, people who've run startups before, to help founders figure out their short-term goals, and then check in with them every couple of months on how well they're doing against those goals.
Hmm.
And so you have these sessions where a lot of advice gets thrown at these poor
Hmm.
founders. And you really have to think about where it's coming from. Is it coming from the VC in the room? Is it coming from somebody who's been in your shoes before? Is it coming from somebody
Mm.
who's failed, doing something, and that's the only thing on their mind, which is like to try and get you to avoid it,
Yeah.
whatever they failed on. So I think people need to also rely on their gut. Maybe
Yeah.
more than what we normally say. We usually say surround yourself with advisors and experts, and you get a lot of conflicting advice. And I think being able to navigate your way through advice is a really big skill.
Yeah, and like everything else, it's about the context. So each one of them has their own context, like you said. So that's sometimes we don't know what the context, and that's the problem.
Yes.
So trying to understand the context as well, why they're saying what they're saying, is important.
Yes.
And then any advice for aspiring entrepreneurs that are trying, or innovators that are trying to venture into this intersection of technology and healthcare slash biocare slash prop care, prop tech, sorry.
Yeah. I think it sort of goes one tack if people are looking to raise venture capital.
Mhm.
And if you are really passionate about a problem, hopefully not a solution, but a problem, then uh, go for it, try it. You only get one shot at life, try it.
Mhm.
Keep in mind if you want to raise money from professional venture capitalists, keep in mind what the trends are there before you get too far. And it's a market like any other. There are things that are popular and things that are not popular, and they're waning and waxing every single day. And some companies will get funded instantly with certain buzzwords, and some won't, regardless of how good their prospects might be in the long term. Just recognize that there are fashions in the people
Mm.
who are funding your company. And so, um, if you can play into those and have those work to your advantage, great. If not, don't stress too much, but just know that it might be a little bit longer. It might take a little bit harder
Mhm.
because I've seen X companies doing this. You get these kind of phrases,
Yeah.
or they had one big company in their portfolio that did something that vaguely sounds like what you do, and it blew up. And so they're like, we're never doing that again. Um, Recognize that people making the decisions, especially writing the checks, are people too, and sometimes it's not super rational. But it's good to be aware of it or to think through where people's heads are at before you go out and start fundraising.
And the fashion these days is AI, if I'm not mistaken. Like if you have something with AI, then they will open the wallets.
I have strong feelings about this, partially because we've been doing fundraising for AI for a long time. Before it was cool, I'm going to make a T-shirt. AI before it was cool.
Yes.
Um, I think there's a lot of hype, and I think there's going to be a big lack of defensibility around a lot of the companies that are feeding off this hype right now,
Right.
because it is going to become these large language models are going to become so ubiquitous. I mean, found this amazing situation where basically the most valuable technology company on the planet, their employees up and line go to Microsoft, and that company, yeah, like I don't know.
Yeah.
It's less about the open AIs of the world, but more about everybody who's building off of those large language models, which
Right.
is it's easy for you to do it. It's easy for everybody to do it.
Everyone. Exactly. Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've seen that all the conferences I'm going lately to, it's all about AI, and it's almost like people are using it even in places where regular solution could work as well. You don't really need AI there. So that's I think also part of it. And not every VC will understand it to that extent.
yeah,
And they might invest just because of the hype or because they want to have a portfolio that will include that. And then eventually, we know, what's that not every startup actually is successful,
yeah.
and most of them
It,
are not. So
it
yeah,
used to be that the wisdom with AI was that the data is the oil, right? If you have an exclusive data set, that's the
right.
oil. I don't know if that's really the case anymore. I'm
Oh,
not
okay.
in day in and day out, but I feel like so much of the data has been, again, democratized. It's all getting sucked up into these models.
Hmm.
I don't know how much exclusive data, really, how much people are valuing that anymore. So it's going to be
Yeah.
interesting to see how it evolves.
Yeah, but it's also cool to see that, like how you put it, like before AI was cool and before it was even allowed to call it AI, but we call it machine learning. What did you learn from that experience that you have, all those years in that industry? And I'm sure part of what you already said is part of that, but any other learnings?
One of the major learnings was how different AI research is from applying AI,
Hmm.
and how rare, especially at that time, amazing researchers are. And we had um, because of the history of Toronto and the University of Toronto specifically,
Right.
Toronto has always been a hotbed for amazing AI researchers, who
Yes.
basically built the industry or built the practice, the field.
Yes.
And um, uh, we found when we were working with other organizations or trying to explain it to investors that people who can apply AI are becoming not a dime a dozen. There's a difference in great AI engineers and not, but it's a lot more commoditized than the people who are actually innovating and doing the research themselves. And when we were doing Meta, it was just about the time where Google, Facebook, and Amazon were starting to recognize and suck up all the talent in
Mm.
Toronto ecosystem.
Yeah.
And so what we were dealing with was, having these brilliant folks on board, and then they turn around and they'd have an offer for, $1 million a year salary, and they were 2 years out of school, kind of thing.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
so so we focused on getting the folks on the team who were really, really mission oriented, and ended up with some amazing researchers, and then some really
Mhm.
good engineers who knew how to apply it. I feel like that spread is even more right now, and I think the
Mhm.
companies who are really investing in the R&D side of it, especially the R side of it, the research side of it, might have a leg up going forward. But the folks that are just on the applied side are going to have a hard time defending
Yeah.
against competitors.
And I was working in a startup a few years ago that they were doing that, and I was lucky to work with several of those graduates from U of T, and they were doing both research. So the company, it was a startup, and after they came out of Y Combinator, they were actually saying we are doing half research, half applied, because they understood the importance of that, and also because the people inside wanted to not just do the applied one; they wanted to do the research. I think that every scientist in this area, they want to continue innovating on algorithms and on way to create better AI models. But it's very hard for a startup to support that, because you need to start making money. You need to be able to support what you're doing.
Yeah, yeah, and
Mhm.
that is where one place where, at least it used to be, that the proprietary data access that you have was one thing that we used in recruiting. So we had negotiated access to all scientific papers, the right to be able to machine text mine them, and
Mhm.
nobody else had that, including Google. Google Scholar didn't have that, and so we attracted some absolute top notch of, the world's best engineers in natural language processing because we had access to that data set.
I see. Yeah, that's like data is the oil that you're able to lure them in for sure. No, that was an amazing discussion. I'm really, we can continue like this for hours, but I think we covered so many great topics there. Is there anything else you would like to add to to our audience about anything related to product management, innovation, AI, technology, poppy, health, buildings?
I think the one area we haven't touched on is maybe just food for thought to leave everyone with, is around navigating your career in product.
Mm.
I
Okay.
think I think AI is a big part of how it's going to change, for
Yes.
sure. I have my product manager now, essentially, what does he call himself? The chief engineer of Chat GPT prompts. And so that's his his expertise in putting together a mock to show somebody and getting feedback on it, without again having to write a line of code or involve the engineers, etc.
Right. Right.
So I feel like the tools at our hands as product people right now, it's incredibly exciting. I feel like
Yes.
content creators are going to feel a little bit in jeopardy. I think how they embrace or don't the new technology is going to really make a big difference.
Yeah.
I do feel like no job is going to be entirely AI proof, but I do feel like product thinkers, really good product thinkers, who can also bring together the business model, the pricing models, the marketing, like product marketing of it, the functionality, all the stakeholders we talked about on the B2B side,
Hmm.
um, it's a skill set that is going to continue to evolve, but it continue to be incredibly valuable for
Yeah.
any organization doing innovation. So fret not, but take advantage of the tools that are emerging for us, because it's a really exciting time to be in product.
Absolutely. And I would add to that, from my experience talking about that other startup that I mentioned before. When I joined them, I didn't know anything about AI and what AI and what machine learning is. And I actually took some courses while I was there to learn what it is, but also the paradigm of managing a product and understanding how the product will work
Yes.
was very, very different for me as coming from traditional software.
Yeah.
So it took me a while to really understand it. I think when I was done working there, the company unfortunately didn't survive, but I still didn't fully understand that. But over time, I got a bit more into what is really the position of a product manager in AI type of products.
Yes.
And so that's important as well. But as you said, it's both sides. I see it's both sides. One of them is if I'm managing a product that is AI product or has AI components, what do I need to know in order to make it successful? Or
Mhm.
what is my position as a product manager? And then how do I utilize AI tools to make to improve myself as a product person?
Yes. Yeah, that's
Mhm.
exactly
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you so much. We usually also ask our guests about a shout out to another product. So if there is a product that you really like, and please don't shout out to any of the known products that everyone is using, but something unique that you really love and you would like to mention.
Can I do a product shout out to a program, which is, I've already
Go for
mentioned
it.
it on the call, but I do feel like if you are at the early stages of founding a science-based company, AI-based or any other kind, I would strongly encourage checking out the Creative Destruction Lab program at creativedestructionlab.com.
Hmm.
Um, Part of what I was doing in my PhD research was researching startup accelerators and do they really accelerate or not. And I came across this program in its infancy. I think they had just started, and it was taking a completely different take to every other accelerator at the time,
Hmm.
and it
Hmm.
still is incredibly unique. Um, and it's a really disciplined. They don't take any equity. They recognize that everybody's most valuable asset is their time. You
Hmm.
get astronauts like Chris Hadfield being your advisor in the space stream. You get just tremendous people around the table,
Hmm.
and you can learn in 9 months. The group can really help you understand if you've got a business there or not, like a potential business there or not.
Yeah.
You set
Amazing.
goals and measure against them. So if people are at the earlier stages of their product and thinking about starting a new company or just having started a new company,
Hmm.
um, I recommend the program with no hesitations.
And to me, everything in life is a product. Our career is a product. So I'm very happy with your suggestion, even and shout out, even if it's not like a digital product. So it's very good. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. This was really a pleasure. If people want to reach out to you, where they can do that?
Just reach out on LinkedIn, Caley, and just mention that you heard the podcast, and I'll prioritize that to get back to you.
Absolutely. And thank you so much again. Really, I'm following Poppy and we're looking forward to see all the amazing things that you're going to do and all the healthy buildings we're going to live in the future.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thanks for inviting me. It's been an absolute pleasure. And if anybody listening sees a poppy in the wild, take a picture and send it to us. I always love poppy in the wild photos to share with the team.
So if you're listening to this and not watching it on YouTube, go to YouTube and see that um, Elizabeth just raised the last version of Poppy, and it actually is beautiful. So you want to look into that, or just go to poppy.com. You will see it there as well.
Yes. Great.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. This was Beyond Product podcast. I hope to catch you up next time. Please share this and like it and tell everyone about the podcast. And also send us any feedback. We'd love to hear from you. Take care, everyone.